it's in New York State, they'll move to Jersey to escape the tax. Gee, if that were a concern, then we would be seeing Mr. Cuomo having urgent meetings with his counterparts in Connecticut and New Jersey, since they could all three solve their problem if they all three did this together and thereby precluded the escape hatch that would otherwise exist. Or here's another option. Let's have it administered by the federal government and let it apply to all 50 states. So each stock and bond portfolio pays a property tax to Washington, which rebates it to the state in which the people paying the tax are located. That's already being done in other areas. It would be easy to do here. But let's take it another step. Suppose they offloaded, to use your phrase, they tried to leave the country. Ha! Then what? Come on, let's not be sheep. This is a game of chicken. This is a bargain. We tax you, you try to escape by running away. We pass a law. You try to run away, we take your factory. We take your stock accounts. We hunt you down wherever you go. You can't escape. You can't escape a murder charge by going to another state, and you can't escape it by going to another country. We follow you. You can't do that. The corporations don't want such laws. They'll sit down and bargain. They understand the game. To be told that, you tax us, we'll do something to screw you, the only response of a democratic government is, you try to screw us, watch what we can do to you. You don't want this struggle, Mr. Corporation, because you've got a good chance of losing. There's no technical problem here, there's just a political problem. Well, the answer might be, if we tax them, then they won't invest. They won't create jobs. They will be angry that you're taxing, and we'll fight back by not investing the money. Hello? The answer of the government is, okay, we're going to tax you. If you respond by not investing the way you were going to, we're going to tax you even more, because we'll take all your money and we'll invest it for you. What we need for our economy is to get that money invested. We don't need them to invest it. We don't need them at all. And they know that. This is a game of chicken. And more of the cards are in the hands of the government than are in the hands of private enterprise. And they know it. The only bizarre thing about American society is that the rest of us don't know it. And that allows them to get away with things that they have no reason. And that's why they fight so hard ideologically, to make sure these questions don't get put on the agenda. Because then they lose. They need us to think it's not doable. That the choices are really cutting taxes, cutting services. I like to use the following image. It's a little extreme, but I think it works. You're walking down the street, and a masked bandit leaps out of the shadows and confronts you. And he says, I'm either going to shoot you, or I'm going to stab you. But I believe in free choice. You choose. Now, there are two reactions. One, you can begin to grab your head and pace back and forth, trying to figure out which of these to choose. Or you can say, hello, I don't accept this range of options. Get out of my face. You're not going to get me to choose between these two. To be told we're going to choose between Republicans and Democrats, between keeping our taxes down and laying off everybody, or keeping our services going and taxing ourselves to death, that's the same choice. The answer of a reasonable left that is self-aware is to make fun of the option, not to agonize which one do we want. All our leading politicians, Republican and Democrat, want us to agonize between the two options they present us. The only response of the left is to ridicule both of them for the status quo they support and for the failure to open the options that are really there. But we need a political force that will make these things happen. Let me give you one quick example. Well, yes.
I had a question for you about quantitative easing, which is, it seems to me, the last couple of years, there's been a fourth source of money, which is that the Fed can create money. Now, if that money had been used in job creation programs as opposed to improving banks' balance sheets, wouldn't that have been a kind of win-win situation that would have got us out of some of this trouble? Or is it in fact the case that, in the Hegelian way, it would have begot another problem?
Well, it always depends. Quantitative easing is a popular new term. Americans are geniuses at this. If a reality is painful, call it something else. If it is unbearable to continue being a janitor, we rechristen you a sanitary engineer. And it just changes your whole life. So we don't call it printing money, which is what it used to be called. We call it quantitative easing. But it's basically an activity that the law gives to the Federal Reserve. We in the United States don't have a central bank like other countries do. We have the Federal Reserve, which is our central bank, performs exactly the same functions. And one of the things the central bank can do is literally print money. And I mean that literally. They call up the mint. Mr. Bernanke calls up on the phone and he says to the people at the mint, we had a meeting and in our judgment it would be good in the United States to have more money circulating. So please print up, I don't know, $20 billion worth of $5 bills. That's how that's done. The Federal Reserve does that. Are you all okay with it? The President doesn't do that. The Congress doesn't do that. The Federal Reserve does. Do they need the approval of the President to do it? No. Do they need the approval of the Congress to do it? Absolutely not. The Federal Reserve is an independent agency. They decide how much money there'll be. So his question, correctly, is, they have been, in fact, printing money. They do it both physically in the way I just described, but also in an electronic way. They simply credit banks with a larger reserve than they actually had. That gives them the right to lend that money out, since all this stuff is now done electronically. So quantitative easing means increasing the money supply in the United States. So his question, could you have increased the money supply? And would that have been able to be used, for example, to hire people? The answer is unambiguously yes. They could have printed the money. They could have lent, the Federal Reserve could have lent the money to the government to hire people with. No problem. Now the question that arises in many people's minds, and this is not too good economics training in America that it goes like this, gee, if there's more money, then there'll be an inflation, prices will go up. That's just a logical mistake. Right? If you print more money, and the money is distributed to people, and so they go out and spend the money, then every business in a private enterprise system has a decision to make. Every store. Knowing that there's more money out there, every storekeeper can do two things. The storekeeper can either say, ha, people have more money, they'll have more to spend, I'm going to raise the prices on everything I charge. Because people have more money, they'll pay higher prices. Can a storekeeper do that? Of course he can. They're a free enterprise. He can do whatever he wants. Here's the alternative that a storekeeper can do. People have more money to spend, I'm going to call my supplier, have him ship me more stuff, because I can sell more stuff at the same price to people who have more money. Whether more money has the first effect on inflation, or the second effect, putting more people to work, producing all the extra stuff, is a function of the decisions private capitalists make. The determination of whether a money increase produces an inflation or not depends on the behavior of private capitalists, because they have a veto on the social effect of a monetary increase. Is that a reasonable thing for us to have? Of course not. Why are we giving businesses the power to frustrate a government program? The government trying to increase money This gentleman over here is our new president. He wants to increase our economy. He wants to give people jobs. He prints more money. He gives it to the government. He says hire people. He hires some people. He gives them money. And they go to the store and all the businessmen raise the price. Not only has he not put lots of number of people to work, worst of all, his program has produced an inflation. Now what have governments done faced with the sabotage of what they're trying to do by the capitalists? Here's the interesting thing. Sometimes governments have gotten so angry and so upset by what the private sector does to frustrate their policies that, and this answers your question, they come in and they suddenly show a kind of political courage that is shocking. And here's what it's called. In some countries it's called an incomes policy. In other countries it's called a wage price freeze. The last time we had that in the United States was in August, the 15th of August, 1971. President at that time, a real left-winger, Richard M. Nixon, Republican president, goes on the television on the 15th of August, 1971, and he says to the American people, I'm sick and tired of this inflation. Now, he doesn't use my language. He's not a Marxist. This may come as a surprise to some of you, but he wasn't. He was, in fact, a Quaker. He was. He was. Lapsed. What?
Lapsed.
Well, you know, lapse is like beauty. It's in the eye of the beholder. In any case, what did Mr. Nixon, our Republican president, say? He said, I'm going to stop the inflation. I don't like this. I'm angry at the business community. So as of tomorrow morning, the 16th of August, 1971, here's what I'm announcing. Any businessman or woman in the United States who raises the price of anything they sell will go to jail. Richard M. Nixon. I'm not making this up. Some of you are looking at me. Go read the history. You'll learn. I didn't make this up. He declared a wage price freeze. It became a crime. A crime. You got arrested and went to jail if you raised the price. Any price. Well, then you've got your problem solved. Then you put money in the economy. You've just taken away one of the two options of businesses. They can now only react to the extra purchasing power by ordering more stuff. They can't raise the price. The Republican conservative president told the capitalists that one of the most sacred freedoms they have, the freedom to set the price of what they sell, they don't have anymore. And he didn't blink. And nobody said boo. They all did it. So don't tell me the government hasn't got a lot of power. Sure it does. There was a consensus then that the inflation in the United States, which was running crazy. By the way, why? Because the government had a war to fight that it dared not tax. The people in America didn't want that war. By 1968, the Tet Offensive, the war in Vietnam, was unpopular. The way to end that war real fast would have been to tax the American people to pay for it. So the government didn't dare. It just borrowed the money. It borrowed and printed money. And the inflation went crazy because private capitalists responded by raising prices. It got so bad that it threatened to destabilize the United States, so a Republican president had to go to the capitalist class and smack them on the hand and tell them they didn't have the freedom of enterprise anymore until he told them they would.
Why did they end it? When did they end it?
Ended it about 6 months later. But they brought that inflation to a crashing stop. Another little lesson. Oh, it's an inflation, what can we do? What can we do? We know what to do. It's just a political question. Do it. But it's amazing to watch businessmen stop raising prices when the price of doing so is a quick trip to the jail. Oh, the compliance you get is stunning.
And to take a counter example,